Hello, hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of Teens Biz Talk podcast. We are so excited that you are here with us today. For those of you that this might be your first time tuning in, Teens Biz Talk podcast is all about us talking to other teen entrepreneurs about how they got started, what drives them to do what they do, and they share other just kind of business tips and tricks to hopefully help you avoid some of those hurdles along the way in business. I am super excited for our guest that we have here today. Real quick though, before we jump into that, if it is your first time listening and you're listening on a podcast platform, please go ahead and subscribe. If you are tuning in on our YouTube channel, hi and welcome. Please go ahead and like and subscribe. We do not want you to miss not one thing. Today's episode is being sponsored by Bateman Empowering Educators. At Bateman Empowering Educators, we take away the trial and error method of your teenager learning about money and business and replace it with a practical blueprint to help them to create a five-star financial future. So be sure to check down below for our link and different resources that we have available. All right, so now we're going to get into it. I need you all paying attention, listening to our guest today, because I know he is going to give us some things to just help us be better, not just better in business, but just better contributors to society. That's what I'm feeling like this is going to happen today. Okay, so we have with us today the incredible Elijah Lee. Elijah is a community activist, public speaker. He is an advocate for children and an ordained minister. Thank you so much for joining us today, Elijah. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
Sure. And so, because this is a podcast for teenpreneurs, if you wouldn't mind telling us, how old are you?
Absolutely. I am proud to say that I am 15 years old. I actually just turned 15 in December, so it's kind of still new at the game.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. So I just mentioned a couple of things that you do. I know that with just those few things, it definitely has to encompass a lot. If you can just share with us a little bit, let's start with community activists. Just kind of what pulled you towards that particular work, because it definitely is a work. And kind of what do you focus on in that aspect?
Absolutely. So when it comes down to a lot of my community activism work, at the very heart of it is finding new and innovative ways to constantly empower young people. However, that message has definitely shifted over time. So I started really when I was 10 years old, and I remember back in first grade, a friend told me that they had been experiencing some abuse at home. And as a first grader, this was my first opening to anything that wasn't really light. Um, and so we went home and, I had a long conversation with my mom about what does this mean? And of course, me being me, I had all these questions of why does this happen? And how do you do this? And how do we change this? What's the solution? How do we make this better? Can we fix this overnight? Is it something that we can fix in a week? And then also as a first grader, I had really no concept of time. I don't think I fully understood the issue that was at hand. And then there was also this kind of other awakening in my eyes is that the second I realized that there's problems in our world, I also realized that child abuse was not the only one. And so as really, really young, my mom ensured that we were educated. I learned about Martin Luther King Jr. and Harriet Tubman. And I was reading To Kill a Mockingbird in third grade. And that was the life. However, there was also this part of me that thought, well, I don't see slavery. We're out of a time, like of course, like everyone in my community looks like me, but that's just life, right? Um, but it is only when I got older that I recognized that the issues of racism, the issues of sexism, the issues of a massive wage gap in America, these issues, they still exist. And child abuse still exists. And so really focusing in on child abuse just because I didn't think that I could be an activist in the other realms. I led my first Child Abuse Awareness March in a really small community, and that got over 200 people. And I think that was the moment. That was the moment where that light switched in my head. That was the moment where it all changed. And so from there, it was finding new ways that I can, encompass my community, be a part of the society that I live in, while constantly working to better it as well. And then of course, as I got older, I became more aware of the issues that we see in our modern day society, the issues of police brutality, the issues of racial discrimination in business, and how hard it is, especially for young Black men and women, especially how hard it is for women overall to get involved in the realm of business and entrepreneurship. And so learning about these issues, I think that my advocacy shifted, and it said that my job is not only to fight for those young people experiencing hardships at home, but my job is to join all young people in our modern generation to uplift all young people. You know what I mean? I think that when we look across the movements of history, which is something that inspires me, we see unity. And I think that's the kind of new message of what I'm going through, is that my community activism is based on young people, but in the name of unity and togetherness.
That is awesome. And just thank you for having, what we can definitely hear is the passion and the drive and just the conviction about that. Yes. Wow. So one of the other things that I mentioned here when I introduced you was being a public speaker. And so I can only imagine just speaking up about certain topics kind of create an avenue, right, for people to want to hear more about it. As you were kind of moving into that space of public speaking, did you come across any challenges, like maybe people saying, oh, you're too young, you don't know enough, or anything like that? Any challenges?
100%. And I know that this is something that to many people it's like very, very sad to know that even as 10 years old, as I'm trying to use my voice to spark change, I faced a lot of criticism. And it was coming from all communities. I think that was a little disheartening to see that it was coming from the African American community, it was coming from, the Caucasian community, it was coming from everyone. And they all kind of thought that, oh, kids are kids. They don't have a say in this. They don't really care about this. We shouldn't really listen to them about these issues. We're the ones that have been fighting it for the longest. We know the most. And there's a part of me that really recognizes that. I'm beyond grateful for the elders and ancestors that have participated in a fight. However, I also believe in the importance of passing on that torch. I believe in the importance of it is in the adults' fight for justice and fight for a better future that we also have to be willing to simultaneously invest in our young people. We have to be willing to teach them this way, because there's going to come a time where our adults are not here with us. And also, this work is tiring, and our adults deserve to have a moment in their life where they can just live. And that point in time, it is going to be up to our Gen Zers. It's going to be up to our young people to rise to the occasion and continue that fight. And that was really the message that I had to always show adults, and recognizing that we are in this together. The fight that you are fighting is the fight that I am fighting. Your strive for justice, I am right there with you. Your need to make our spaces more diverse and more inclusive, I am right there with you. Your need to incorporate more and more populations of people, I am right there with you. We're in this together. But I guess there were several times where I had people to say like, oh, you're too young. Oh, you should just sit down and be quiet. You don't belong in this conversation. There was even a time where I was set to speak on a program, and someone approached me after I spoke and said, when they told me a 12-year-old was speaking, I almost left. And I'm so glad I stayed, because you speak really well for a young Black man. And I think that that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. And even recognizing I worked really hard on that speech. I worked hard to kind of show you that young people are here. And even then, I was still labeled as this young Black man. And I'm proud of that identity. However, that's not all of who I am. And so, yes, to answer the question, there is definitely some challenges and obstacles that you have to overcome. However, as my advocacy has grown, so have people's willingness to open their minds and to say, hey, our young people are amazing. Our young people are rising to the occasion. They're doing what they got to do. And in some cases, actually, they're showing up and showing out, even in some of our adult conversations and crowds. So I think that while yes, there was once a time where young people were hindered, I think we're kind of still in that time. But I think now more than ever, our young people are rising to the occasion. We're getting things done. We're being efficient. We're being effective. And I think that's really starting to show.
Awesome, awesome. And the thing about it is, I would imagine several of those elders that do want to say, "Oh, we've got this over here on our side." Many of them started when they were young. When we look at
Absolutely.
pictures and we read accounts, excuse me, of the early times of the fights and the struggles. It was the young people. When we see the pictures of our people being hosed, it's the young people, it's the kids that cut school in order to be present, in order to stand up, for these things. So thank you for just helping to remind us all that yes,
No,
we are all in this together. Yes, definitely. So something else that I just wanted to touch on, you talked about um, even like being invited to speak in a particular place, and just as your advocacy has grown and become more well known, people are beginning to recognize you for the work that you do. I would imagine a part of that might be because you've been in different circles, right, and just networking with people, and getting to know, and not just other teen entrepreneurs, right, or other young people, but then also other adults, right, to pull them in, like you said, to help to create that unity. What would you recommend to our teen entrepreneurs today? Because certainly networking and just engaging with people is so much different today, and especially in light of just what we've, well, kind of still in, come out of, still in the pandemic, right? So what suggestions would you have for them to still get out there, meet people, engage, create relationships, engage in collaboration?
of course. I think so. For me, when I really started, networking was really difficult. I was great in these open atmospheres where I could speak to a lot of people. But something I really struggled with was how do I talk to people one on one, and how do I really build these connections? Because it's these one on one connections that this is what helps organizations. This is what helped my nonprofit, and this is what helps me even outside of my nonprofit and some of the other work that I do. And so I really had to learn how to adapt to that. So the first piece of advice that I have is that you have to go into every situation with a mission. Every single time that I gave a speech, every single time I started a conversation, every single time I went up to someone that I was a little scared to talk to, I said, why am I doing this? I remember there was one time I recently got involved with a lot of political work and talking to lawmakers. There's this one time where there's a legislator and they are my hero. They're an idol to me. And I really needed to talk to them about a bill that would really empower young people in Virginia. And however, I felt like I couldn't do it, right? These people are so much bigger than me. These are better than me. Than they have this high position. I can't go up to them. And then I recognize that right now, as a young person, I represent other young people. When someone looks at me, they're going to look at my age. They're going to look at how short I am compared to everybody else. And that means that this interaction could be the first interaction they ever have with a young person. And I have to keep that in mind. And so understanding that, I said I'm going to do it, and I did it. And it was a great conversation. This legislator was highly supportive of this bill, which definitely helped. However, I think you have to be bold. You have to be willing to go into risky situations. And you have to remember why you're doing it. Because if you don't know your why, then you will never know your where, and you'll never know your what. And then secondly, I think that we as young people have a great advantage that was not always awarded to generations. And that is social media. I feel like we oftentimes hear about the negatives of social media, how it can be a really bad place. And that's true, right? I recognize that. And how it could oftentimes be a place of a lot of hurt and pain and negativity. However, I also am a believer that we create the spaces that we are in. We have an opportunity to make or shape an environment. And so I choose every single day to make social media a place where kids can grow, where students can flourish, where we as young entrepreneurs can grow as business owners, where we as young advocates can grow in our voices, where young policymakers can grow in their legislative skills. And so I think that we can use social media to make the world spin, quite frankly. And so whether this is you're reaching out to really big accounts and saying, hi, my name is so-and-so, and I run this amazing business. Here's what we do, and we would love to partner with you. Even if you don't get a response, you being willing to try, that is power. And going to small accounts on Instagram and Twitter and TikTok and Snapchat and things like that, and going to these accounts and telling them who you are, having real conversations with them, and not always for the betterment of yourself, but for the means of a partnership. You go into this with mutual benefits. That is really, really, really helpful. And so I think that, again, there's two folds of it. There's this one side where you go into your one-on-one connections with people. You're bold, you're fierce, and you have a mission when you go in. And then on social media, you have conversation with accounts, you reach out, you make your presence known, and you're not afraid to be bold sometimes. My mom has always taught me that I'd rather be annoying than unheard. And no matter what, never silence my voice. And so I think that that's going to be my final message. Always, always, always make your voices heard, even if it means that you're a bit annoying.
Awesome. Awesome. Oh my goodness. All right. I already know we're going to have to do a part 2 here because we are running out of time and there's still so much more that I want to talk to you about. Okay. One last thing that I do want to address just in terms of when I did the introduction, you being an ordained minister. So if you can just talk to us a little bit about how, I guess kind of the level of contribution that your faith does have to the work that you do, and then also just a little bit of how do you balance that, right? I would imagine there are some challenging situations that come up that might test one's conviction. So just how do you balance that?
So I could sit here and talk about how being a young preacher prepared me for public speaking. I could sit here and talk about how having a very loving church really allowed me to grow as an activist, and that's all true. However, I think in growing in my faith, I recognize at the very heart of my activism is my faith. At the very heart of my activism is working every day to be a follower of Christ. The Christ I know was someone that loved people. He was someone that fed the poor, housed the homeless. This is the man that washed the feet of those that society kind of pushed out. And so, yes, I find scripture really important and powerful. I find going to church really powerful and important. However, I think that being a Christian is more than going to church. Being a Christian is more than, knowing your Bible verses. Being a Christian is living every day as Jesus did. And while we're not perfect as human beings, we never will be. I'm going to be honest, there are times where I mess up. There are times that I don't always listen to my mom. There are times where I make a mistake at school. There are times I'm not the best version of myself. However, every single day I live life knowing that I'm going to be as close to Jesus as possible. So if this means I work with other young people to build blessing bags that we can hand out to those experiencing homelessness, then that's what we do. If I work every day to ensure that children have a voice, then that's what we're going to do. And yeah, the balance is hard, but again, I feel like my faith and activism I feel like they're brother and sister instead of competitors.
Awesome. Awesome, awesome. Well, I'm afraid that is our time, but I do hope that we have an opportunity to bring you back for more. There's so much more that I know our community would just love to hear from you. But was there anything else in particular that we did not talk about that you want to make sure we get out?
I think only that I hope any young person listening to this understands that you have a community behind you to support you. You have a community behind you that loves you and wants to watch you succeed. So don't ever be afraid to access that community, and you got it. Always go through knowing that you're on top. So yeah, hats off to all of you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And for our community that wants to connect with you, because I know they're going to want to, how can they?
Absolutely. So you can find all of my information about upcoming events, about my socials, all of that at incredibleelijah.com.
Awesome. All right. And for those who weren't able to write that fast, no worries. It will be down in the bottom. So you can just click on that link and go right there. Thank you again so much for today. This has just been very encouraging, right, for our world in light of what we might be watching on the news, the negativity that we see. Yeah, just that, you know what, we can do it. The unity aspect, like you said, collaboration and approaching people with a mutual benefit. So thank
My
you
honor.
very much. Thank you. And so before we leave out, I just want to share what I always share at the end of my podcasts to remind everyone, remember, everything in creation was created with a gift inside of it. That includes you. So go out and share your gift with the world. We'll see you next time.